Hello, everybody. I want to try to stick with some of the really cool information from Farmer Burns. I think it's really interesting. So we're going to give you some more of it. This again is coming from the life work of Farmer Burns. So in this chapter, and I kind of want to not just talk about this chapter only. I kind of want to give you guys a little bit more from some of the other works, including some of the stuff that he said in his like his correspondence courses. All right, but let's go ahead and talk about this chapter here. He's basically giving advice to people who want to enter the profession of, being a professional wrestler. It's actually good advice for anybody for like who wants to be an athlete or who wants to do well in athletics. I mean, you can take it with a grain of salt or whatever, but I think it's the stuff from the early 1900s. I think it's always really interesting. And I believe even though Farmer Burns wasn't well educated, because he was born in the very long time ago, and he really didn't get a chance to learn or go to formal schooling and stuff. But when he was married and he had kids, he made sure to get his kids educated, right? So anyway, I think it seems as though he was someone who really appreciated knowledge, and he often quotes different books and stuff in his writing, and they cite a lot of different research and different things like that. So it seems as though he was all about that knowledge and information. So I think that's always something good for everyone. Just a little added thing. So we'll go ahead and get into his advice for a professional wrestler. He basically lays out five main points, but then later on he adds a sixth one that I'll go ahead and let you know about because he doesn't list it as being a sixth one, but when he kind of goes on talking, then he kind of mentions like, oh, there's something else that I learned that can help. Right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and list the first one. So the training of every muscle and tendon to do the bidding of the mind by working with these muscles and tendons unceasingly, right? So did you get that right? Basically it's like he's not only, I mean, he's definitely talking about drilling, and sparring and stuff. um, so but the more you read about what he does or his philosophy, he also talks about like going for a walk, especially outside, right? And working outside and being outside, really filling your lungs with fresh air. He says that's why he kind of prefers to be in a more of a rural environment as opposed to living in the city, where especially the cities that he went to at those times, at his time, are full of ash and soot and stuff from maybe the industrial activity going on, and at those times. So he definitely preferred being very active. Also, Frank Gotch was a big time runner. Um, um, Farmer Burns also kind of mentions either walking or taking long walks or jogging and stuff like that. Nowadays, my 2 cents would definitely be adding some kind of stretching. I personally prefer uh, that you find some kind of yoga that you like. It doesn't have to be some of these say like some people you don't like or whatever. I mean, I know sometimes yoga has like some weird practitioners or weird teachers that might put you off, but the practice itself is actually really great because you actually do get on your hands and knees. You get on the mat there, yoga mat or whatever, and you move around and you do a lot of almost like wrestling specific or um, like basically you get used to moving around on all hands, on all fours, right? And so Kuma's mentioning DDP yoga. Yeah, if you like DDP yoga, do it. That's one from Diamond Dallas Page, who I believe his story is actually really interesting, and I think we should kind of talk about it because, as far as I understand, is that I believe he was age 40 when he got into big time pro wrestling, and he said that really doing the yoga um, like really helped his longevity and keep his athleticism in the sport. So that's the thing. It's not that you're like yoga is not that you're doing whatever some kind of religious practice or anything like that because you're not doing the movements really help uh, kind of strengthen your body sense while being on the ground, and also it helps to stretch and strengthen those muscles, especially the you're at your joints. So hopefully you don't mind this little tangent here with regards to the sports physiology. But your muscles are attached to tendons, which are attached to your bones, right? And they help you to move, like say moving your arm, right? But say doing a lot of these kind of like even some of the like different types of yoga positions, uh, those help strengthen your joints when you're in those positions, right? And a lot of these positions, so kind of like a what we call like referee's position or defensive position, or sometimes in jiu-jitsu you call it like turtle. You'll actually have a stronger turtle, right? Because yoga actually puts you in these kinds of positions where you're bearing your own weight, and sometimes you have to bear your weight for a long time and actually start moving around, like moving your legs, so getting used to these types of movements that you actually find yourself in when you're grappling or when you're doing wrestling, catch wrestling, even jujitsu, right? So that's one of the main things uh, I personally like, and I've done, and I believe it really helped protect my joints. Um, so he doesn't. Farmer Burns doesn't mention that specifically in his book, right? So I don't even think it was a big or very well known in the United States so much at that time. But anyway, the second point that he mentions, right? So the use of foods that give health and strength to the nerves and muscles, right? So, yeah, like use your food as your medicine, right? Um, Not to say that I mean that certain things work better than others. Um, so I know that in his other writings he gives a lot of like what he eats and stuff like that. But just know that yeah, like quite a lot of the fruits and vegetables, a lot of the plants are really good at helping you to recover faster, and they reduce a lot of the inflammation in your body that you get after working out, right? But if you get that combination of even the water, the hydration, being properly hydrated, stretching, after you work out or doing the yoga, so it's a kind of an active stretch. That's the other thing about stretching is like if you can actually be using, uh, like doing activities that require using your range of motion, that helps your body to maintain that range of motion because it tells your brain that you're actually going to be using this amount of flexibility regularly. Then your brain in turn helps support your body to maintain that. So same thing with actually we'll kind of get into it later because that's one of the other points that he makes later. Right, so yeah, hydration, eating a lot of plants. Even what's popular nowadays is the turmeric root. Right, that's at least in LA everyone's talking about it, but I'm seeing it a lot online too. Right, it's a root, and it's really one of them. It has several compounds in it, and we haven't identified every single one, but we've identified one called curcumin that is strongly anti-inflammatory, and it's been shown to even be more effective than a lot of Western drugs that treat arthritis, right? So it's food basically. So you can blend that up into your smoothie or whatever, or learn how to cook with it, right? It's in a lot of Indian food, right? Um, all right. The third point: regularity is essential. That is, a certain amount of time should be devoted to work and so much to periods of rest, right? You gotta rest. In another chapter in his book, um, Farmer Burns mentions like say if you are like a someone who has like a 9 to 5 job, he really still recommends that like sure do your time at work, but really try to add like being outdoors. He mentions being outdoors and exercising outdoors. If you can do a couple hours a day, right? I know for some people that might seem difficult, but this is just his recommendations. But also, his recommendations are for someone who's aspiring to be a professional athlete, right? So even if you have to work, Like you gotta make that time. You gotta, put in the work really. And also, he mentions the rest. So he understood that's basically when our bodies recover. And so to kind of give a little bit more of the science behind that is we have, like, put simply, we have, everyone's heard of like that fight or flight mode, right? That when we have stress, our body goes into fight or flight. It doesn't really matter if you're, like they always talk about, if you're being chased by the lion or whatever, and you're activated into fight or flight. It doesn't matter about the lion or not. Our bodies don't tell the difference. But even if you're in a stressful situation, you hit your boss, or you're in a dispute, or at work or whatever, and even with a coworker, or if you deal with a lot of customers and you have a back and forth with some customer that's unpleasant, our bodies all see that the same way. Doesn't have to be a lion or whatever, tiger or bear chasing you. Um, our bodies will react, and it'll shift us into that fight or flight mode. But we have to talk about what the opposite of fight or flight mode, right? Which is uh, that's when our parasympathetic nervous system takes over. And so what that does is you can think of it as like um, your recovery and digestion mode, right? So um, so that's why I say, like, people who are stressed out a lot, right? Then sometimes they'll complain about having irritable bowel syndrome, right? So that's been associated with high stress lifestyle, and so it throws off the functioning of our digestive system, or or even feeling achy and stuff like that, because our body isn't spending enough time out of fight or flight so that it can more efficiently repair itself, right? So you do gotta, like, say you gotta decompress after work or whatever. Like, and Farmer Burns, recommends going outside, taking a long walk or training, right? Filling your lungs with fresh air, right? So that's Farmer Burns' advice. Okay, so number four. So this is kind of interesting because, like, uh, we're at number four, and has he really mentioned anything wrestling specific? Not quite yet. I mean, the first one was kind of about like working out, so it could be a little bit more general. But finally, at number four, we get to wrestling, right? So the learning of every hold, bar, and lock that it is possible to learn, and aside from this learning, to invent as many ways as possible to get away from these holds, bars, and locks, right? So, um, yeah, you got to keep learning. He also mentions later on that he's always a student of the game, right? And so regardless of your sport, you got to be a student of the game and see how like what are the different trends, and kind of almost staying on top of the trends and understanding what these trends are. But ultimately, knowing the wrestling fundamentals, especially the specifically the catch wrestling fundamentals, where it has a lot of what amateurs might see is like some of these sit outs and sit throughs and switches and stuff like that. But in catch wrestling, not only can you go to pin the person, you can also go to submit the person, and that's like the key difference. And so Martin Burns, because especially at that time, just like nowadays, I mean, when they were doing professional wrestling, or you can think professional catch wrestling, when they were using the catch wrestling rules, we had people from other countries and other different grappling styles competing in catch wrestling rules. So it's beneficial to understand kind of like their point of view. Let's say if someone who's coming, say like Hackenschmidt, I believe he was more of a French wrestler, or he had a lot of experience doing French wrestling, which nowadays we call it Greco-Roman. So you got to understand that they're going to be going for upper body takedowns, right? They're going to try to lock you up, maybe suplex you, or but they're not. They might not grab your legs so much. And this is one of the things we talk about Hackenschmidt and Gotch, where because they're not used to grabbing legs so much, that they were scared of Gotch and his toe hold, right? Because in catch wrestling, you can grab the legs, you can grab the foot and stuff. That's kind of one of the things that you can kind of take into consideration. Like, what are these other styles? And so you can you can familiarize yourself with these other styles, but my opinion is that you really gotta understand the catch wrestling the best, right? So really, like focus on learning all the ins and outs of that, and then you can kind of understand the other styles like the sambo, the jiu-jitsu, or the Greco, stuff like that. But the main thing is understanding catch wrestling the best you can, because that, at least in my opinion and in my experience, right, that helps me when I travel around to other countries, competing in different, they're different styles, right? Like, jujitsu, like no-gi jujitsu, and also even like in China, I did several different traditional styles, and one of them, which was in Yunnan, and I think there was a video recently, even some people shared with me that there was a woman who was competing against a man. If it was China, um, it could have been in Yunnan because they were both wearing belts, like sashes, and it's basically freestyle rules, continuous. There's no submissions, um, but they really focus on just like you really got to pin that person. You just got to dominate them, right? And then you can win, right? So having um, the catch wrestling fundamentals that really helped me compete. I competed for money there, right, in the sand pits in Yunnan, and yeah, had a great time. Also won enough money to pay for my stay and all that. So catch wrestling, like catch wrestling, maybe it wasn't the jiu-jitsu or anything else that helped. It's the wrestling fundamentals, right? So the fifth point, the strict abstinence from every form of excess, either physical or mental. Right. So Farmer Burns was a big time believer in discipline, like discipline of the mind and like basically your intake, right, of whatever it is. I believe. Actually, no, I don't. I know he didn't smoke, and I don't think he drank, and he even didn't use bad words, right? So um, even so someone who came from a very poor background, not really well educated. He did kind of have a strong set of morals and strong set of beliefs, and so I believe he always wanted to maximize his physical potential, and uh, doing all these different things that he felt were like disciplining himself, his body and mind, were always like of great importance to him, and actually, I think it resulted in him having such a long career. He outlived uh, Frank Gotch, who unfortunately died very young of a disease that is supposedly curable nowadays. I forgot the type of disease. It was a kidney disease, but I forgot which one it was specifically. So that's why I don't know much information about it. But supposedly nowadays it's a curable disease, so that's unfortunate, right? So, um, so those are the five main points, right? So I'll go over it real quickly again. Number one, training every muscle and tendon, right? Hold and so that you're so that they can do the bidding of your mind, right? Number two, the use of foods that give health and strength to the nerves and the muscles. Number three, uh, regularity. So you got to train regularly, and you also have to rest well, right? Number four, learning every hold, bar, and lock that is possible to learn, but also trying to figure out escapes for all these holds, bars, and locks, right? Number five, the strict abstinence from every form of excess, either physical or mental, right? But then I said I was going to add another one, and this is what he feels is his key to longevity too. He says this is why I'm still able to beat these youngsters in matches, right? So what does he say later? Let me see if um, he says I learned to rest during a bout, right? So and so I think that's something that's kind of more common nowadays, right? People might talk about it where it's like you can't go in there just actually in a way for catch wrestling in particular, and especially if you're doing a 20-minute match or no time limit type matches like in catch wrestling. So you can't go in there doing amateur wrestling, or you can't go in there with the same mindset as someone who does folk style or freestyle, where they have a very short match, right? They have a very short time limit overall. You can't be just going in there and going for blast doubles and stuff like that, because maybe maybe you'll get lucky and you'll pin the person or you'll submit the person really quickly. But if you don't, and the other person's very relaxed and not resisting you so much, but they're still defensive, and you're trying to hit them with all you got, you're gonna fatigue, right? So this is Farmer Burns' other little gem, where he's like, over time, he he kind of figured out that, right? He didn't quite know that when he was younger, right? But he kind of figured out, like, oh, I don't have to be like resisting all the time, because there were no time limits in his days. There were some contests where it's like, if you can win money, if you can stay with whatever champion wrestler, if you can grapple with him for more than 10 minutes or 15 minutes, then you can win money or whatever. If they can't pin you or throw you down or whatever. He did a lot of those at first, um, but same thing, 15 minutes, right? You still gotta be, you gotta know how to resist, but also how to relax so you can last 15 minutes. I mean, I don't know if people quite understand. So those of you who are athletes or especially grapplers, it's like, 15 minutes of grappling, even jujitsu, it's like it can be very fatiguing, right? So you do have to understand or figure out how you can try to relax and not just like be so rigid all the time, right? Especially when you're grappling. The other thing he kind of mentions about training, um, is that, yeah, don't necessarily go all out. He says, I did not go to a gymnasium to ruin my chances by trying to acquire abnormal strength in a hurry, but just used my head a little, right? So what he said is, yeah, so everything kind of like little by little. Don't ever like really just like go all out for all this stuff, or like basically don't lift as heavy as you can all the time and then do it again the next day, because you're gonna wear down your body. It's not good. You got to build up over time. Also, like I mentioned earlier, it's like that sends a signal to your brain that it has to support the growth of the muscles, the maintaining of the strength. So it'll divert in time. It'll divert the nutrients that you consume. It'll divert those nutrients to support and sustain that strength, that range of motion, that flexibility. So even though he didn't necessarily have all the science or the physiology knowledge specifics, it's really stuff that we know about today. And this is a bunch of stuff that I studied when I was undergrad at UCLA, like the sports physiology stuff. So you really have to be using your head, right? So just like him, using his head, understanding the importance of rest, also the importance of consuming things that help support our bodies. But the thing is also the regularity um, with the training. So specifically for like if you want to lift weights and stuff, totally fine. But you have to make sure that you don't, like, say if you're doing upper body exercise, if you have an upper body routine, that you don't just do it one day and then the next week you do it again, stuff like that. That's not regular enough. You can still basically, for the way the science goes, for your brain to want your body to maintain that, or maintain the muscle growth, you can't go more than 3 days without retraining that same muscle group, right? So otherwise, your brain will be like, oh, this person's not serious. So let's just break down this muscle that we grew, because our body does not want to support anything that we're not using, right? So keep that in mind. That's why you have to be doing these types of movements, using your range of motion, and then supporting with sleep and nutrition, right? So um, the other things would definitely kind of be like mindset and stuff like that. So I kind of want to go into that um, um, in another one, but I want to kind of I'll read a little bit more about quickness. So he says, in speaking to the professional wrestler, I might tell him how I acquired quickness, skill, endurance, and strength, and give it as a recipe that would produce splendid results for them, because it did for me. Right? but were the reader to follow my instructions to the letter, he would probably find that any individual demands would not meet his individual requirements. So I can only advise that a man who possesses the strength, health, and determination to practice with men who are skillful, as skillful as he can find, and keep his eyes open and his brain working, noting the defects of both himself and his opponent, and save his strength for the time when his opponent is weary and worried. All right, when exercising, remember that fresh air is food for the blood, and that blood is really food for muscle and brain. So never be without plenty of fresh air. And also remember that brisk walks of 10 or 12 miles, interesting, 10 or 12 miles, right? In the early morning air are excellent methods of giving the blood an ample supply of fresh, healthy food, right? These walks should be on the brisk walking and fast running order. The running consuming about 1/3 of the time spent covering the whole distance, right? So if you want to be out there less time, he says just run, right? So, but yeah. So that was the same thing also too, from what I understand about Frank Gotch. If you guys ever get a chance to go out to Humboldt, Iowa, where he was from, the house that he lived in was kind of closer to the city center, right? But the house that he grew up in was a little bit more on the outside of the city, or well, the outside of the town, right? And basically, he was a runner. So he if you're out there, you see fields, vast distances, and you can just run for the longest. You can run for hours if you want, really. Um, all right, so let's go ahead and get to some of your questions. Go ahead and start asking. Right now, I see some of the comments here already. Right? Do I watch WWE or AEW? A little bit more so. I know more and more pro wrestlers that I'm working with, so I try to pay attention to some of the trends. Um, Thank you for watching. All right. Oh, yeah, so yeah, the nice mention of DDP yoga. If you guys, so and I would recommend any yoga practitioner that you like, that you feel comfortable with, and you like they're learning. Here in LA, we have like a yoga studio on virtually. They're like jujitsu gyms, right? They're virtually on every corner. Um, I have a good friend who I've worked with for a long time named Liz Arch. She's here in LA. She has a really cool style of yoga. I think it's called like primal yoga. So you do a lot of like these animal movements and stuff. Also mixing in some of the like kickboxing movements and stuff. So it's really challenging. It's also a great workout, but you use the range of motion a lot. All right, so it's pretty great for your body. Does this information come from lessons in wrestling and physical culture? No, this is a separate text, but I'm sure he kind of reiterates a lot of these things in his correspondence courses, right? So yeah, this is from this book, right? So I'll go ahead and show it to you. All right, see. The life work of Farmer Burns. All right. Okay, so um, let me know if there are any more questions. Hmm. Best exercises for grip. Actually, some of the best exercises for grip are even doing like dumbbells. Actually, I think what we'll do is we'll do a video, a really cool barbell exercise for grip. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that. I think maybe something's going on with my phone. I don't know if the video is looking kind of jumpy right now, so maybe it's a good time to end it. But go ahead and keep commenting, and then we'll try to get some more questions. And so what I'll do is I'll write down and try to make a video for you regarding the grip. Cool. Yeah. Keep on. All that stuff is really great. All that. So someone mentioned about doing the Gotch Bible thing where the card and each card represents the exercise and stuff. So it's a good way to kind of basically keep you moving, right? Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and sign off right now. All right, thank you for watching, and go ahead and let me know if you have any other questions, and we'll be back next week. Thanks.